I have with me Juan Mateos-Garcia from NESTA, Research Fellow at NESTA, and Kathryn Parsons from Decoded. You may have been expecting to see Jemima Kish from The Guardian as well. She sends her apologies. She has been pulled off because she's covering the new DG of the BBC, who's just been announced while you were all in here this morning. Tony Hall, Lord Tony Hall is the new DG of the BBC. So, Juan, I think you're going to kick off with some slides looking at the skills for the next generation of the workforce.
So, let's see if I can get the PowerPoints. Oh,
there we go.
So I'm here to talk about the data wars, which is basically what we at NESTA believe are going to be a kind of company that's going to be succeeding in the internet economy, and they're a kind of company that are going to be requiring some very special skills. So basically, we are all here. We agree that we need innovation to survive. But in order to innovate successfully, we're going to need to answer a set of difficult innovation questions. They are simple but difficult at the same time. They are basically, what do we do and how did we do? They are basically questions to do with strategy and learning. The question is, who are the people who are going to be answering these questions and what tools will they use? We believe that they will be using data. They will be using the abundant amounts of data which have been made available by the internet. And this is going to change everything. It's already changing everything. We are seeing how, whereas before we standardize, today we have the data to personalize. Whereas before we guessed, today we have the data to experiment and learn. Whereas before we just did what we used to do last year, now we can adapt. So this creates a great innovation opportunity. And at NESTA, we were very curious to see whether UK companies are making the most of that online opportunity. So we went out there to collect some data, as you do, and run a survey of 500 UK internet companies to see whether we are finding these companies stepping up to the innovation challenge. And we found that some are. We call them the data wars. They are those companies that report that when making decisions about how to grow their sales, they base these decisions on data and analysis over experience and intuition. We found that these companies are 80% more likely to mine their data and 60% more likely than others to run controlled experiments. They are also much more likely, 3 times as likely, to use online data to inform their business strategy, not just use data retrospectively to produce reports and so forth. And what we found is that these guys are twice as likely to say that they experience substantial benefits from their ability to use data. It appears that data is really acting as a driver of competitive advantage for these companies. So how many companies in our sample did we find doing this? Actually, we found that these guys are in the minority. Only 18% compared to 43% of companies that we found base their decisions on gut feeling, on hunches, on experience and intuition. We could maybe compare the data wars to the Nate Silvers and the other 43% to the Pandits, and we know how that went. So basically, like to see more data wars making the most of this innovation opportunity with data. Because otherwise we think this could be quite risky for business in this UK internet economy we have been talking about today. So we believe that the education system has a very important role to play in producing people that will be driving these data wars, as it were. And this is going to be about producing people who can analyze data in order to generate insights. And this will be the data scientists, this will be the mathematicians, this will be the statisticians, computer scientists. But we're also going to need data users, people who can ask relevant questions and people who are good users of this data. And this is going to be about managers, but it's also going to be about everyone in the workplace, people in the front line, teachers, workers in the health service, even people down, customer service reps and shop assistants. All these people are going to have access to devices to access information which will help them to make the right decisions where they matter. We need those people to be able to interpret those data in order to make the right decisions. Indeed, it's not just going to be about having the right data skills to perform well at work. It's going to be about our day-to-day lives. We're going to need to be able to figure out all these stats that are being thrown at us, be able to analyze all these data sets that, for example, the government is making available in order to make better decisions about our life and also hold the government to account. So this is going to create some interesting challenges for the education system and schools. We know that statistics, we know that coding, we know all these skills are hard. We know that in some cases they are counterintuitive. It's almost like our brain wasn't wired to think in terms of statistical significances, samples, probabilities. So how is the school system going to cope with this? Also cope with the variation in learning styles amongst people. This is one of those subjects where those who are good are really, really good. And how can we teach them and assess them in a way that doesn't leave anyone behind? We wouldn't want to heal the digital divide to create a data divide. So we believe that technology has an important role to play in addressing some of these challenges. We believe that technology can be used to create much more engaging learning experiences for young people who get to use data as a tool to figure out real-life problems. Brilliant example of this is the way in which think crafting is used in massive online games in order to get game players to develop their statistical skills. Think about it as World of Warcraft sabermetrics. And it's a great example of how we can use platforms to provide an environment that makes sense for young people to develop these skills. We also believe that the education system has a lot to learn from these data innovators. Only last month, the US Department for Education published a report, very sexily titled something like enhancing teaching and learning through educational data mining and learning analytics, which very much looked at the potential of applying these techniques in the context of schools. And basically, it was very much about how can the US make its education system a data war. We'd like to see that applied here as well. We shouldn't be surprised to find that across all fields of life, across all areas, across all sectors, companies are going to have to adopt the right data practices to make the better decisions. And why is this? It's quite clear that data, the big data boom, and all the opportunities that it creates is the big innovation story of our time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Juan, you kind of paint a picture of, well, datavores who will be in the workplace of the future, or the near future. Can you give us a sense of the kinds of percentages involved? So in a workforce, you ideally would have computer scientists, but you would also have, I suppose, what you would call tech-savvy people who understand working with data, who might not necessarily be computer scientists. What kind of proportions would you expect there? And the people who have neither of those skills, where would they sit in the infrastructure?
We don't have data for the UK. We have some data for the US generated by a McKinsey report last year. And this basically suggested that by 2018, there might be a shortage of 150,000 people with deep analytical skills in the US workforce, and these are the data scientists. They also thought that there would be a skill shortage of 1.5 million managers able to make sense of this data. So that's the sort of scales we're talking about. In the UK right now, we are producing around 10,000 graduates on maths. And there's been a growth in the supply of those people, but the question is whether it will be enough to fill this data gap. We also know, of course, about the problems with computer science in schools as well as universities, which are now being addressed thanks to the work of many good people, including next-gen skills.
Great. Okay, now let me introduce Kathryn, because Kathryn's set up a company called Decoded, the precise aim of which is to take people who don't have a coding background and give them the rudiments of computer science. So, Kathryn, are you going to show some slides?
Yes. So I'll just go through really quickly, actually, because for those of you that don't know what we do, and for those of you that do, I'm sorry, but I'll keep the focus very much on the work that we're doing in business. We're also doing quite a bit of work in education. So Decoded, very simply, we teach people how to code and in a day. And actually, we set up over a year and a half ago now. But it really came from a mission that everybody and anybody should be able to learn these skills, and they should be able to learn them very quickly. And it sounds like mission impossible, absolutely, teaching someone how to code in a day, but it's something that I think we've absolutely achieved. And it came from a conversation with one of the co-founders, absolutely about skills in the industry that we came from. So I came from the creative industry, so did Steve. Steve having discussions with the CEOs of digital businesses and brands, and I was having conversations with people trying to get into the industry, get hired, try and get well-paid jobs. And we knew that there was this kind of dark art called code, and CEOs were talking about APIs in their meetings and not actually really understanding exactly what the ingredients of what they were actually selling was about. And also people were trying to recruit hybrid skill sets into the industry, but finding that they were very, very thin on the ground. Or there was a really big difference between a creative technologist in one company and a creative technologist in another company. One would be a welder, another one would be a coder. So, and we also knew that nobody has any time. Could you actually condense, 8 months worth of learning into a day and get people to a point where we start, generating literacy and also skills at both those ends? Now, we launched it into creative industries. We absolutely knew they needed that, but we probably should have known that it was a bigger desire amongst lots of different industries to learn these skill sets. I mean, this is just kind of a sense of some of the kind of some of the kind of clients that we've had. But really, it goes across the board. We've had kind of Accenture this week, right through to Unilever, right through to, I think when you came, Peter, you were sitting next to a guy who'd driven down from Birmingham for the day, and he was like, he was a builder or something. And absolutely, it's a leveler. You don't, whatever kind of industry you're in, and this just gives you a sense of the kind of different roles of people that want to get equipped with coding skills, because digital's affecting everything. Whether you're a floristry designer, or obviously the VP of digital, you have digital in your job title. Actually being fluent, conversant, being passionate about digital and actually skilled in code are all the skill sets that these people are desperately crying out for. And it's a global demand. We are a London-based business, but absolutely that kind of feeling that people are increasingly having to manage huge digital projects, but without an actual kind of coding background or technical background, it's universal. And people shouldn't be expected to know these skills already, because actually it's not being taught in schools. And that is something that we are working on as well, which we could talk about separately, I think.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Lovely. Okay, now, shall we... We can just throw it open to the floor now. Just don't hold back. I think there are roving microphones. So if you've got questions for Juan and Kathryn, just raise a hand. Oh, there's Sarah. Go ahead. Go right ahead.
I should know the answer to this question, but I don't. Juan, can I ask you, when in the research, how did you define a data vault? What sort of decision making are they using their data to help them inform? Is it give me some examples of what these kind of companies are using their data to do.
We define them on the basis of whether they reported, and this is a self-reported measure, whether when making decisions about how to grow their sales, whether they used data and analysis or experience and intuition. Which is could be seen as a bit of a loaded question, because most people would tend to be biased towards saying data and analysis because it sounds more professional. As it is, we found what we found. What the data boards are doing, and it's not all of them who are doing this, I must say, is basically, as I said, they are being much more comprehensive in the way they collect their data. They are being much more sophisticated in the way they analyze those data. They are doing all the basics plus more stuff. And they're also crucially using data to make decisions, forward thinking, not just backward thinking.
I was at a conference this morning with a lot of PR people, and there was a lot of people talking about how there's a sort of fear and a growing divide, and they find themselves saying, I don't want to touch that, I'll get the tech guy to do it. And is that something that you're seeing in companies?
Yeah, and we assess people's confidence across lots of different things, whether it be coding languages and just overall, before they come on the day and after they leave on the day. And it's very interesting to see how nervous people are. They've opted out of the idea that they could possibly learn these skills at such an early stage because of a lot of myths, cliches, stereotypes. And it's a real kind of almost therapy session in the morning where people kind of have to get off their chest, I'm not going to be able to do it. And actually, the most amazing thing is people igniting a passion in people where they realise that actually it is for them and it is for people like them, especially within communications, actually. And you'll find certain groups that have particularly opted out. Women being one of those groups, definitely across the board with all the research that we've done, the level of confidence coming into the room is much lower when it comes to women coming in. And why is that? Why have women opted out emotionally of thinking that they can actually kind of grasp this skill set?
But what level of competence are you expecting at the end of the process? What is the desired end result from the people who go through your course?
I mean, it was interesting. When we started, I think we just focused upon the best of learning. Our methodology of actually taking someone from zero skills, confidence, knowledge, right through to blank sheet of paper, coding intuitively themselves and in a fun way, using HTML, CSS and JavaScript, a multi-platform app, those first steps of getting them behind the screen. But we never said what people should get out of the day, and I think that was actually quite a good thing. And it's allowed us to look back a year and a half later and go, what did happen? What happened immediately? What happened 6 months later? How did it change people's lives, or how did it actually affect their business? That absolutely depends upon what you do. If you're an HR director, you can hire more effectively, assess skills more effectively. If you're a creative, you've got a whole new paint box to play with, and you can suddenly start prototyping some of your concepts that you were having to go through rungs of processes, and it end up being a PowerPoint chart when it was actually a digital concept. It's very, very different. But it does fall into 3 areas, igniting a passion for code amongst people who never thought they'd have it. Very big across the board, people saying that I feel I can talk to developers now, bringing that communication divide, closing that gap. And also, back to the point that you said, innovation, coming up with ideas, being able to think ahead and actually, forward think, which is very different, the impact of that's very different for a CEO who comes and learns to code with us than maybe someone who's just getting into the industry.
Yeah. But Juan, how do you see this evolving? Because at the moment you have people with traditional backgrounds, probably not competent in coding or data, who are trying to grapple with the new world and are trying to hire the right people to make that new world work. But presumably over time, that will change, and those CEOs who are in place at the moment will no longer be in place, and it'll actually be the computer scientists and the coders who start to run businesses.
Indeed, I mean, if that happens, then many more companies will start to look like Google, being a very data-driven, very much places where decisions are made on the basis of evidence rather than the opinion of the highest paid person in the room, things like those. So indeed, that we believe that this is going to be the end game, just because of the efficiency and innovation gains that can be derived from using data to drive decision making. The question is whether it's going to be happening in the UK or someone else, and that's the reason why we really want to get up to speed in terms of ensuring that all these companies have access to the skills they need to implement these strategies.
Yeah. Okay, there's a gentleman here.
Software. I'm a coder. I was going to ask, do you just teach them pseudocode, or are you actually looking at specific languages that you're trying to teach them in a day?
Yeah, so we've been laying out a kind of methodology of how we, a best practice approach to getting non-coders into code that's kind of very, very detailed, more from a kind of education point of view that includes visual programming. But actually on this day, it's much more about kind of breaking down a lot of the jargon, barriers, concepts very quickly. Once you've done that, getting people to a stage where they are coding, and beginning with HTML, then into the CSS, then into the JavaScript, but getting people to really think like a coder. Now, a lot of people will come out and they'll go, oh my God, I do not want to be a coder. But I get it, and actually I can talk to that person in my team, and they have a bit more empathy. I mean, certainly when we started, you can imagine there was a big response from the coding community, but luckily they have absolutely embraced us. I mean, they work with us and for us, and it is about really making those skills accessible to people who really did just opt out way too early of it, or they're finding that their roles require them to understand it. And actually, I think to the point of, will managing directors kind of be coders? I think managing directors will always be managing directors. They'll be good managers of people. But actually, I think this hybrid skill set's about empowering people with the skills that they need to do what they do, but a lot better, supercharging their skill set in the workplace.
Theo, you had a question.
Theo Blackwell from the Next Gen Skills campaign, which NESTA and Google and Decoded are part of, and some others in the room. And we campaign for reform of ICT and computer science in schools. Just picking up on the point just made before, in particular London. I mean, competitive advantage is sort of hard won but easily lost. And despite the reforms that the government's put through, which are long overdue, I'll just highlight some statistics that came out from the DFE in October. 375 children did computing A-level in London last year, and that runs at the rate of about 0.4% of all A-levels taken. In the 6 boroughs where all of the large IT enterprises and employers are based, which is essentially Westminster, Camden, Islington, Hackney, Tower Hamlets, Southwark, 32 children did computing A-level. Nationally, 7% of those who take A-level are women. So the challenge facing not just the digital capability of companies, which you've articulately addressed, but also the new talent, which takes some time to get in, is actually quite steep.
Yeah, I mean, these are really alarming statistics.
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of change in terms of the curriculum over the last year. And I suppose the question is, given that change, do you see signs of being on a better path and that those statistics are going to change anytime soon?
Oh, I think it needs a bit of a facelift, to be honest. Kids are aspirational. They've got dreams about what they want to be, who they want to be. And actually, if you ask most of them, do you want to be Mark Zuckerberg? Do you want to create your own version of Twitter? I think they'd say yes. I mean, that's kind of quite a, flippant point maybe, but actually I think it's quite an important thing to do to actually show people why these skill sets are attractive and lead to attractive careers, and rather than kind of maybe a lot of the the education of IT is suffering from a lot of the cliches, myths and stereotypes as much as the the professional community are kind of grappling with, I think.
Go on.
And there's also an issue that is not just about technology. It's not about teaching kids how to code, how to program. It's also about how do you teach them, how do we make the most of these new technologies in ways that engage them. And it is in many cases going to be about not doing things top down. It's going to be about doing things in a much more peer-reviewed way that makes the most of these new technologies. And changing the way the classroom is run is going to be a big challenge at all levels.
We went into Stoke Newington School and we presented to the school there, and we said, right, we're competition. We're going to teach kind of a certain number of you kids how to code whatever your concept is from scratch over the course of kind of however many weeks. And I think the kind of vibe when I went into the assembly room was slightly a bit like that to begin with. But then we put up on the screen pictures of entrepreneurs in the area, Michael Acton Smith, Songkick, a lot of these kind of digital businesses, the new rock stars. And actually, I think we had something like 300 entries for the competition. They were really kind of inspired by it. So as much as people say kind of, women aren't into code, I mean, we almost have like 50-50 now ratio on people coming to Decoded. I think kids are absolutely going to be passionate about this. You give them, something to play with and they'll run with it.
Okay, last couple of questions. Nick?
Thanks. Nick Newman, Reuters Institute, Oxford University. I think the work Decoded is doing is fantastic, and I completely get the idea of once you've done it, you have a better ability to talk about what technology can do for you at all aspects of the business. I just worry that there's a bit in the middle that's missing, and that's a skills gap that isn't talked about enough, which is how do you... So we're not going to have managing directors doing code, but we want more people to be using tools that help them analyze all this big data and actually make sense of the whole thing. And it feels to me that that's where there's a big skills gap. And I'm not quite sure what you need for that, because it's not just about engineers, it's about problem solvers who have an understanding of technology, have an understanding of business and all the rest of it. And I think that's one of the biggest single issues if you compare us, say, with the States, where somehow those entrepreneurial skills mixed with code and technology seems to be stronger, and I think we're missing that bit in the middle.
Juan?
Yeah, I was talking before about the rocket scientists, the data scientists, the quants who are going to be producing all those insights that managers are going to use. We need those quants to ask the right questions for a business. And we also need them to be able to present them in a way that's compelling for those managers. And that's going to require a very different skill set from the one picks up in a PhD. And the question is, how do we configure our universities, courses on degrees that are going to equip people with these kinds of skills so that they are also good business people and good entrepreneurs so that they can go into those businesses, ask the right questions, do the rocket science thing, and then get the insights adopted.
And when you look around the world, do you see countries that are doing this better than the UK? Who are the best examples of good practice in this area?
I wouldn't be able to say. This is such a new area for us. We haven't started looking at international examples yet. And one thing that one sees, I guess, when you look at Silicon Valley, for instance, is that people know how to do the entrepreneurial thing because they have done the entrepreneurial thing. They have tried, they have learned, they have failed, they have learned, and basically they find themselves in a position where they can do both things. They can be ambidextrous in that way. So basically, in a way, a solution to this skills shortage that we find in the UK is to encourage more data scientists, more physicists, more computer scientists to be entrepreneurial.
Yeah, great. Okay, time for one more question. Do we have a question? One more, gentleman here. Yeah.
How much do you find dashboards and business intelligence become just a buzzword that's used in the boardroom rather than actually realizing what it actually means?
We got lots of companies who report using dashboards, many more than those that report actually doing anything with what comes out from the dashboards. So yeah, it feels like actually we did run some, again, being data-driven as we are, we did run some econometric analysis of the data, and we found that there were more companies who said they collected data than companies who analyzed data than companies who use data. And basically, the ones who use data are the ones who benefited. So you might have all the dashboards in the world you want. They're not going to make a difference if you don't use those data to make decisions.
And I'd add in companies that visualize the data as well into that.